Good evening. It is 7 o'clock, and I will call the meeting to order and pass the chair to Councilor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any declarations of financial interest? No delegations this evening. Can I get somebody to move the agenda? Councilor Westwell.
I move the agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconder, Councilor Fox. Morris.
Thank you. I did see the nod of royal assent. I'd like to add 2 items. It behooves council. They're both late to the table. The first item would be an additional appointment, an expression of interest that I would like to put under item 7, advisory boards. B, economic development advisory board. 3, EDAB reappointment, Helena Katz. The other item I would like to add is under other business, 10, item B, road closure December 31st for the fireworks display.
Councilor Westwell, you agree with the changes?
Yep.
Councilor Cox?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, the minutes of November 10th, 2020 minutes are in your package. Have been adopted at the council meeting on November 17th. Any questions? I'm carrying on, vision, values, and goals. Nobody's putting their hand up. Community Services Master Plan. Okay, carrying on, Economic Development Plan. Okay, we'll jump right into Director's Report. Recreation stats. Mr. Morris.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Director White back after 5 months of not helping us out. We're glad she's back to help us out. And she'll be giving the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if I remember how to do this. Okay, we'll just start right in with statistics. You can see that there's not a whole lot of change, a little bit decreased with some users in squash and peach gym in regards to sessions, but in fact the number of participants has gone up. So I think in squash we're now allowing 2 people on the court at the same time, and earlier in the fall we were only allowing 1 person on the court. So I know that the squash club is looking to get back up and running for youth squash, and so they are putting in an exposure plan to try and get it so that the coach can be in proximity with the athletes on the court. Lane swim continues to be pretty successful. Seniors lane swim went down both in number of sessions and participants, but and so did the public lane swim for the number of sessions, but the number of participants went up. And I'll actually have to check that one because that looks like it might be. Nope, that looks right. Okay. Pool rentals, again, we've had a bit of a decrease in the pool rentals over the last couple of months, but still fairly active, lots of people using it. Drop in sports, youth nights, you'll see we've started to add those youth nights where we've broken the kids up into age groups. And we do have some participation there. I think it's a maximum of 25 kids per session, and it's on a first come, first served basis. We run that 8 times in the month of November. And pickleball up and running, continues to be, I was there one day when pickleball came in and there were probably 8 seniors coming in to play pickleball. So I think they're happy to have that back up and running. And same with seniors walking. We haven't seen a lot of them in yet, but I'm sure that we will as the temperature starts to drop and things freeze up a bit more. We did have a PWP fire drill, and I will actually be looking to see how that got managed because 55 people in the gym seems like a lot. Hockey, active, lots of use of the ice. People are happy to be back on the ice and continuing to attend. Public skates, more participation at public skates again this month. A few more sessions were offered, but I know that public skate often, if you're not there at the right time, you're not going to get on the ice. If you're not there right at the beginning, you're not going to get on the ice because it is a maximum of 25 on the ice at any given time. We'll continue experiencing spots skating. We are also seeing good attendance at our after-school care program and some increased attendance in our daycare, which we anticipate after Christmas we'll have a few additional children enrolled in the program. We were anticipating 3 for sure, 2 of them half days, and we're opening up some drop-in spots, 2 drop-in spots, either for full days or half days, to trial that out and see how that goes. And we are exploring what we need to do to be able to start to take the 0 to 2-year-old age group as well. And if that's something we can do before they start the renovations of that space. So we're exploring that with ECE as we speak. Otherwise, I think that we're seeing lots of activity in all of our facilities. I don't see that changing. I do think people want to see more, but I'm not sure that we can realistically offer any more than we are currently offering. Oops, that's the wrong page. I can move on to the library stats if that's all right.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got a couple of different things here on the library stats. Our librarian, Ms. McGuire, wanted to give you a sense of how things looked in regards to the borrowing and the home delivery program, or home delivery or pickup service. And you'll see we got a little bit of a spike there in October. We're getting more books, but we're also getting more households that are actively, maybe not every week, but overall there are a few more households accessing the program now than they were in the summer. And that might be related to the need for more books for school reading programming. So we're getting some good uptake there. The computer use, the scheduled computer use times did not get the uptake we thought it would. It's actually relatively low usage for pre-scheduled. So we're looking at more drop-in options around that and sort of a first come first served basis for computer use and for Wi-Fi station, indoor Wi-Fi station use. And again, we're not allowing youth in unsupervised under the age of 12, so those are often our big computer users statistically in a typical period of time. So that would decrease the use of the computers, especially in the evening hours. Otherwise, things going on in the rec department. We're looking to start doing some pool training for bringing more pool staff on. That certainly does limit our ability to offer programming, but always pool is always a challenge to staff because of the ages required to get their certification, and then they graduate and leave us. And so that's going to be going on in the next few weeks. starting up with that bronze cross and first aid programming, and then National Lifeguard later on in the winter. The fireworks celebration it will be happening. The exposure plan has been approved. And so we can talk more about what that means during the briefing note, but it should be relatively similar to other years. I don't think it'll be very much different. We won't run a sliding party, which we've often done on New Year's Eve, just because the contamination of helmets and town sleds and tubes would take a significant amount of time, and we wouldn't be able to use them between, we wouldn't be able to have multiple people using the same pieces of equipment. So, otherwise, lots of sport groups are up and running. Obviously, hockey, skating, cross-country skiing, jackrabbits, and paddle are up and running, and snowboarding is ready to get going as soon as their exposure plan is approved, and they're planning to start signing up boards this coming weekend and start lessons in January. So fairly typical year. We're working with the school on how we can support programming with them. So they have been running cross-country skiing programming and sledding programming. So they've asked if they can put a set of track of cross-country ski track from the school around the outside of the track. And recognizing Mr. Dale will be doing that, so he's very cognizant about not tracking over the actual track surface. And they have been using the sliding hill, and we're working with them to make sure they have a fire pit and everything else that they need to access there. There's been some requests to be able to use the arena, so we're just working with them on being able to use facilities within their classroom cohorts. And with regards to the library, I know that other locations are starting to do open times for browsing the collection, and that's something we'll keep an eye on and determine if that's in the best interest of our facility and staff. I think that's it for recreation.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Fox.
Thank you, and welcome back. Thank you. With the statistics, I just wanted to say I appreciate the extra column of sessions versus participants, because it gives a better picture of how many sessions are running and how many people are attending those sessions. So I think that's valuable. So thank you to staff for compiling that. Great to see so many people participating in there's 8 public skate and 8 family skate sessions, and up to 73 people at the family skate, even in spite of with the limited access and restrictions. So that's really encouraging to see. And again, library, you already touched on that. Library statistics for October are very encouraging. It is interesting that there is not the same uptake on Wi-Fi and computer usage, or that it's not being used to the degree that was expected. Only 4 times in the month of November for computer use. So be interesting to see what can be done to increase that, but that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Napier.
Thank you, Councilor Carter. I was wondering if the rec center has equipment loan programs, or is there any outdoor equipment, snowshoes, etc., that people can borrow?
Yes, we do have snowshoes. We don't currently have cross-country skis because the school purchased a bunch, and the ski club has, if you remember, the ski club, you have access. We do have snowshoes that people can sign out for outdoor use, and there is no cost to that sign out. So,
Thank you.
Anything else? I do have a quick question, and I know I am getting way, way ahead of myself. Come spring and summer,
skateboard park, what's gonna happen with that? I know, I'm really getting it.
Well, there's a couple things afoot. As we know, with during construction, the skate park is sort of located where the doors are in the back of the rec center, and so it's also being used by the laydown by the contractor. So we looked at moving it, but when we were looking at it in the fall, the season was pretty much over. So we can look at perhaps doing something in the summer for the kids. There's also moves afoot to bring in consultants to review the condition of the skate park and put some money into upgrading aspects of it. Bringing the consultant got shut down with the pandemic, unfortunately. So we are looking at a reinvestment in it, but we haven't quite determined what springtime looks like given the construction.
Thank you. Yeah, I just noticed it out my window every morning. All these trailers and piles of lumber sitting there. Anyway, on to the next. Go. Councilor Westphal.
Just to that, I had the opportunity again to be in the basement rec center, and it's absolutely exhilarating. I mean, to see what's happening down there, and just having it more open. The construction is happening very exciting. It's after seeing the drawings of last month's meeting and seeing it sort of happening, it's really impressive to see the open space down there and have a basement. The dankness is disappearing, and it's just it's very nice to see. It's good work.
Good. Okay, moving on, economic development report. Mr. Morris.
The economic development report. Sorry, I was in the process of making a joke about it being a very thankless job renovating the rec center. A play on the good counselor's use of the term dank. And I lost track of where I was, sir. I'd like to hand the economic development report over to the director as well, please.
So much pressure on that.
That's right.
The economic development officer has been busy working on winter vacation campaigning. So we have ads in up here and ads that are for preparing to put in cabin radio. In conjunction with NWT Tourism and Parks Canada. Will be included a feature story with NWT Tourism, so that's good. The Christmas Shop Fort Smith Christmas campaign, which really the economic development officer has been working really hard on. You'll see lots of posts on Facebook around that. She's really getting that out there. I think we're quite happy with that, and we've had some update from the community members posting those ideal Christmas presents. So it's been nice to see the interaction with the community on that campaign. So we saw that, and we have we're going to be ready to get out the prizes when the time comes. This one, the Riot Park. Oh, just want to make it clear that the town staff are going to have better sight to so we're excited about that one as well. I think that the downtown looks beautiful, but this is a great campaign by ICI to have a winter wonderland kind of walkabout. So that's exciting. With that donation to the food bank for Edmonds is great. So yeah, we're working with that with ICI and working to promote that as well through our social media. Working with the consultants on the strategic marketing plan, so that's going well. I think we're going to start to see another draft in January, probably not till the second half of January, from the sound of it. I did an interview with them, so some great questions and a very good dialogue, and I think that they're finding some really fantastic feedback on that as well. Some of the stuff that he followed up with, follow-up questions when I responded, some of the stuff that he followed up with was really, I could see that he was getting the messages that people were sending quite clearly. So that was nice. The economic development officer's also been working with the SAO on some funding applications for community tourism infrastructure for 3 projects, as well as the ICIP funding. ICIP, too many acronyms. So that's taken up a big chunk of our time as well to get that all together. So we will see some of that ITI funding this time around for the community tourism infrastructure fund.
Thank you. Councilor Westwell.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to recognize all the great work they've been doing in the department, but also take a second to re-acknowledge our consultant, who I think in all the years of consultants we've hired to do plans, gets the award for being the most dogged, aggressive follow-up and making sure that they have talked to everybody. Whether I've had a couple of people, local business owners in the store, myself included, who've gotten a phone call while having tried to dodge emails and not take phone calls and get themselves scheduled. And they're too often have we seen that they sort of, well, we tried, no answer. So I've had the opportunity to stack the deck a bit. I think I got 4 different reach outs from council, from other boards, and from nonprofits, and for local business. Or once I told them that I've already filled one out, they left me alone. But I got hounded myself for every different group that I was involved in, and I've heard the same thing from others. So kudos, I guess, to them for actually taking the whole outreach and making sure that you get contacted, acknowledging that people know that one simple email doesn't mean outreach. So I'm happy to see that.
No other questions? Yeah, same with me there, Councilor Westfall. They sent me the email. Of course, I sat on it. Then I got a phone call. It's okay, I'll do it. Okay, moving on. Advisory boards. Community Services Advisory Board. Councilor Goff.
So the minutes in our package are from our November meeting. The board did actually also meet today at lunch, but I'll speak to the minutes in the package. So similar to the October meeting, there was some discussion about the about recreation rates and fees. And at the October meeting, there had been a request for membership statistics for usage of the rec center. And so those statistics were presented at the November meeting and discussed. Also during the November meeting, the CSAB reviewed its policy. And so this policy is the guiding document for functioning of the advisory board for community services, which is the policy essentially added arts and culture to the what was the previous recreation advisory board mandate. So to accommodate, we combined the arts and culture advisory board with the recreation advisory board to make the community services advisory board. And the board approved the policy and it has sent it to council for review. I'm not sure if there's a copy in our package, not in the paper package. Rather than in the digital package. Oh.
Mr. Morris.
I would just, it wasn't brought in this package, but should council choose to accept the recommendation and review the policy, we'll bring it to the January cycle.
Okay, that being said, I will move a recommendation to accept the recommendation from the Community Services Advisory Board to adopt the Community Services Advisory Board policy to be reviewed in January by council. That's my motion.
Seconded. Councilor Westwell. You have to repeat it. Deputy Mayor Smith.
Sorry, I'm just seeking clarification. Are we recommending to approve something that we haven't seen, or that we will get to see something? I was just unclear about the actual recommendation.
That we will see it in January and review it in January.
We're all good on that? All those in favor? Motion is carried.
And thank you. And then just to continue from the November meeting, there was also a brief discussion about playground inspections in the community. And that discussion was based on some posts on the community bulletin board on Facebook. And the outcome of that discussion was to remind residents that if they had concerns about town facilities, including playgrounds, to please inform the town by calling town hall or the community recreation center, and that posting about it on Facebook will not necessarily have the concerns addressed. And that was essentially our November CSAB meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, reappointments. Somebody move that? Councillor Cox.
I move that Alexandra McDonald, Diana Corral, and John Morrison be reappointed to the Community Services Advisory Board for a 2-year term starting January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022.
You have a seconder? Councillor Courvette. Discussion? All those in favor? And motion's carried. Moving on to Economic Development Advisory Board. November 19th minutes. Bring you back. Mr. Courvette, ready?
Minutes are in there. Just quickly, a lot of the content of the meeting we actually discussed last week as part of the bylaw review discussion. But to quickly go through them, there was a report on the summer staycation program presented. There's stats as well. It was quite successful. Both the Buffalo and Queenie both noted that there was good uptake from out-of-town visitors using their facilities. There was some discussion around the marketing plan, about the rewarding of it and things like that, which we discussed last week. And I believe administration will talk to that with the board during your next meeting. Getting back to the summer staycation stats, they were saying, for example, the Northern Lights Museum reported 416 visitors over the summer, and of those, 136 were non-local, and even some from outside of Canada. So I guess there's people traveling and isolating and then traveling some more. Pine Lake stats are down though, quite notable. Talked a bit about some of the advertising and the success of the partnering with Wood Buffalo National Park for a lot of the ad content. And basically that was about it for the summer staycation. administration. The administration and had advised as well that they were well on their way with planning and preparing for the winter staycation program. And I noticed just recently a lot of information on the town website with regards to that. So good work there to the EDO for following through on that. And that's about it for the main interest, other than there was Santa update being this time of the year. I guess everybody wants to know about that. So basically, Santa photos are going to be available through the Northern Light Museum. And they're looking for a donation of $2 for that. Again, the Shop Local campaign was talked about, and a lot of effort is being put into promoting it, and confirmation of the ITI right up the park program was brought up. That's about it.
Thank you, Councilor Quebec. Thank you. Any other discussion? Deputy Mayor Smith?
Thank you. Just want to make a couple of comments. I didn't really understand the context of the discussion last week, having not been able to see the minutes. Now, I read through them. So, someone certainly has to be in their bond of that meeting about town local procurement policies. And I feel like the criticism is very misdirected. And it makes me wonder about the overall scope of the Economic Development Advisory Board. I always hope that the Economic Development Advisory Board can move beyond tourism and to change from Trade and Tourism Advisory Board to, broad-based economic development. And I guess I see the Catalyst Research Group as an opportunity to kind of delve into other economic development opportunities within the community in a strategic marketing way. When I think of strategic marketing, I think of business development and attracting residents, not necessarily who's coming here and which RVs and how old they are. So from my understanding of the Catalyst Group, one of the key consultants is actually the former executive director of the PDIC, the Northwest Territories. So that seems like a very well-positioned person to look at local economic development opportunities within the community. Likewise, the last time that I worked with a consultant hired through the GNWT, through their debt policy, we hired a company out of Yellowknife. However, everyone I worked with was in Ottawa and Montreal the entire time. So there's a lot of that happens with consultants. It seemed like a very Chamber of Commerce directed criticism of the town, and I'm not sure that the SAO going to a meeting is necessarily the right way to kind of address this. I feel like it's almost more like a council type responsibility to talk about that. If there's a problem with a local procurement policy and the Chamber of Commerce or representatives of the Chamber of Commerce or executive members of the Chamber of Commerce have issues with that, I kind of feel like it's more incumbent on council to respond to that. Perhaps I'm making more of what happened than just reading the minutes and hearing the discussion. But if there are concerns, I feel like that should be directed towards council rather than how administration administers an RFP process, which is a public process available on our website at all times, etc. So I'll just leave it at that. I can go on, but I'm very much looking forward to. I thought that the Catalyst Research proposal that was circulated to council was probably one of the best documents I've ever seen on demographics and what's actually happening in the community of Fort Smith. And I have a lot of confidence in their ability to provide insight and some strategic direction for us in the next few years based on my interactions with them and what I've seen and read. So I feel like the criticism is misplaced. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith. Councilor Corbett.
Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor. You're fairly on the spot with some of your observations there. At the meeting, I did mention to the group that the future direction of how we promote the town is going to be hopefully laid out quite straightforward in the upcoming strategic marketing plan. And that in the meantime, we're more or less sort of, when it comes to marketing, treading water, and that we have to expand our thoughts beyond the scope of the traditional views of the board, which is still fairly tourism focused. We are trying to attract other business operators to the board. And that was part of the discussion why possibly we need to look at a change to the meeting schedule, be more accommodating to business owners. And with regards to the shop local or the town's purchasing policy, I think if people were to take a good look at the paid accounts listing that's published every month with the corporate services report, you would see how much the high percentage of business that the town does with local vendors versus non-resident businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett. Other discussion, okay, moving on, we have a expression of interest. Can I get a mover? Councillor Corbett.
Thank you. I move that Lyndon Martin be reappointed to the Economic Development Advisory Board for a period for a 2-year term starting January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022.
Seconder? Councillor Bolio. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Then we have item C. Mr. Morrison, you wanna?
I think we're looking at an additional expression of interest, which was provided, I think, just this afternoon or this evening. It's on your desk. It's an expression of interest from Helena Katz to be on the Economic Development Board. She has experience in tourism development, tourism marketing, and entrepreneurship. She's a small business owner, a local artist, and she's currently serving on the Economic Development Advisory Board.
Councillor Cox?
I move that Helena Katz be reappointed to the Economic Development Advisory Board for a 2-year term starting January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022.
Seconder? Councillor Westwell? Discussion? All those in favor? Against? Abstained? 1, Councillor Corbett. Motion carried. Next, we have bylaw policy and review and development. Nothing? Oh, Aaron Avery.
Thank you. Just, I guess, to connect the Economic Development Advisory Board and bylaws, would it be possible to request, I'm not sure when the business license bylaw was last reviewed, but if would it be possible to get staff input on changes to any bylaws that are made that would affect how staff proceed with processes like the business licensing, rates and fees, etc.?
For clarification.
So, sorry, excuse me.
just so looking at the review that's being done and what kind of businesses we have coming into the community, if there are businesses that are coming in for small events, etc. Is there anything that is in our processes that is making it difficult for businesses to proceed? Is there anything in the process from the staff point of view that makes it difficult to work with new businesses? So if there are any changes that are being made to bylaws, can we get staff input on what their experience is working with those bylaws and policies before council writes a bylaw without having that input, so that we can make sure that all of those items are covered ahead of time?
Mr. Morrison, want to tackle that?
Sure. I mean, one of the things council may have noticed in their tenure with me is I don't rush a lot of bylaws through. I tend to be very cautious, and I try and base the legislation we bring forward on best practice. What I found with legislation is you're never going to presuppose all the eventualities. There's always going to be something coming up that you weren't aware of and didn't plan for, and just writing legislation cold and rolling it out without sort of ground truthing the practice, trying it out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, seeing what causes problems, figuring out what works well. If you don't do that, you're going to wind up with broken legislation that is unenforceable and doesn't accomplish the intent. I think several councils ago, there was a big push to get a lot of legislation out, and a lot of that legislation was sort of written off one person's desk with not a lot of in the trenches experience. And as a result, we have this legislation that we find very unwieldy. So typically when before the bylaw review committee, any legislation we bring has been something that we've already tried to implement through policy or practice to see how it works or how it doesn't work, so that we can bring something that has a higher chance of success to council when it goes through council. Having said that, sometimes it is an iterative process where we need council's input first to sort of let us know what their intent is, and then we'll go back and figure out ways to meet the intent that work administratively as well, and then bring it back to council. So, I think that we've kind of organically been having that process. I certainly want to make sure that any legislation that gets approved by council works out in the field at the pointy end of the stick where we live. Speaking specifically to business, where you're talking about business licensing and whatnot, I think, there is a tie-in with the strategic marketing report where it might identify obstacles to business, new business in town that perhaps is created by municipal legislation, and we're going to have to be receptive to any direction we hear about that. There are always little sticking pieces with the legislation we have, and we tend to kind of make a list and say, oh, we're going to have to fix this. This has always caused a problem. So the next time the legislation is, before council, we should try and fix these things. And so every little piece of legislation we have comes with its fixes. And that's typically when, anybody on the bylaw review committee who's had me bring a bylaw before them, I'll tell them, we're trying to address this has been brought forward as a problem, we need to fix this. I get council direction, and then they try and figure out how to implement the fixes to those problems. So unless there's some specifics that, we're referring to in general, long story short is we try and bring kind of operational awareness to bylaws.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, moving on, administration. Oh,
More of a comment than a minute.
Council Westbrook.
It was more of a comment. was just gonna state that I would actually very much appreciate the additional feedback we get from the, corporate services department now in regards to business licensing and bylaw review. There sort of seems to be a very thorough, director's analysis of, and discussion based around bylaw, which I quite appreciate. Additionally, there has been quite a bit of conversation around business licensing bylaws over the years or terms of council that, strangely enough, has usually resulted in either the chamber or other representatives sort of asking the town to be more of a big government and more restrictive, whereas the town is looking for hopefully less of a restrictive role and more of just a simple control of licensing. SDAP's talked about this as well and had discussed it with developers as well, and so far generally has found that municipality is not normally at fault when it comes to development. If anything, it's the education about what they should be coming to the town for, or what the town already has in bylaw. But generally, that the existing bylaws, no one had made any recommendations in our interviews that there was anything that the town did, particularly with bylaw, that was preventing them from doing business.
Thank you. Okay, we'll carry on. Administration.
Thank you. The first item on the list is the COVID update. So it appears our mask policy has gained great traction because since the town rolled out its policy, Newbeck has adopted a similar policy. I was contacted by Hay River on the weekend for a copy of the policy, and Hay River has adopted it this Monday. So, the town continues to sort of be at the forefront of smart response to the pandemic. And I don't know if it's coincidence, but when we first rolled out our policy and put the call out to local businesses to do the same, within 2 days, that it's now mandatory for masks in the post office. Again, I don't know if that's coincidence. That might be a federal level thing. It's important that, as I think we all are. I'm not sure if Mr. Trudeau is listening, paying attention to our meetings. Other than that, we did get a reach out from Protect NWT for a one-on-one with the community, more of a temperature check to see how we're doing. That will happen sometime between now and Christmas. I don't have a lot of concerns to bring them. I'm not hearing much on the street. The biggest concern I've heard from the public is the status of the Winter Road. I have no updates on that, but I do know that, the mayor has it on her agenda, meets regularly with the premier, and she'll most likely be the first to know. And then we've also been working with MACA region just to talk about business continuity. We've dusted off our business continuity list from the spring, and they're still very robust, and we have no concerns. When I speak about business continuity, it's about the town to continue to perform its roles in the midst of a pandemic. Private sector, with its ability to perform its roles in the pandemic, will we still be able to get gourmet coffee in a lockdown environment? And we're confident that we will. The difference between now and last spring is people have learned how to work in the middle of the pandemic. So I think we'll much better weather any attrition we see in the various workforces as the pandemic peaks. And then other than that, I've received no direction really from council about whether you want us to keep meeting in person or via Zoom. We are currently the only town group that still meets in person. Again, it's at the behest of council. It's not a place I will throw my weight around one way or another, but if council so asks, we can easily move.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, Mr. Morrison. As yet, I've not heard any information on the Winter Road. The last information that I had was that the status of the road was also dependent on whether or not they could have the road going from Fort Chip to Fort McMurray. If there are problems with having that road, then it would be necessary to have the road coming to Fort Smith because they do need fuel and supplies that are not able to be brought in by plane. So we are still waiting for information on that. The second item is the vaccination schedule. I know that Minister Van Val was pushing for the territories to get some kind of priority with vaccinations, but I don't know that that is going to happen with the emphasis going to healthcare workers, et cetera, and the difficulties on getting the vaccinations to the territories with the required equipment to keep them at certain temperatures. But I do know that there is a push from Minister Van Dal and our MP for territories. That is all I have on COVID at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison, item B, TAC resolutions.
Thank you. I just added that as a talking point, the second call for resolutions. Emails were to the council several weeks ago. I heard no talk from council about it, so I thought I'd bring it to an agenda more for council to discuss amongst themselves in committee format.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, moving on to other business. Mr. Morrison, briefing note.
Thank you. The briefing note before council is the arena debenture financing renewal of term. The note speaks for itself. We are now 5 years through a 10-year debenture or loan, which means that it's time to renew the rate. Any of you had a mortgage, it's very much similar. If you go year to year, you get a better rate than you lock in and take a certainty of multiple years. So the numbers are before you. If we chose a 1-year rate, we would be at 2.05%. If we locked in for 5 years, we would be in at 2.56%. My great Santini powers fail me in these turbulent economic times. I can't predict what interest rates are going to do. One could argue they're going to stay low as the economy stays tanked. However, perhaps the vaccine could bring a big spending surge, which might trigger strange interest rates behaviors. By far, the conservative recommendation and the one we're bringing forth, because we are the town of Fort Smith, we must be conservative because it's not our money we're spending, is to lock in for 5 years at 2.56%. Should we go for a shorter term, we have the opportunity to, of course, lock in at a lower, go in at a lower rate for shorter term, and then lock in at any time should we see rates start to go sideways. But realize when that happened, we'd be locking in at a higher rate. So potentially, if the market gets really volatile and we spook, we could be locking in at a higher rate than if we just bit the bullet and locked in at 5 years at 2.56%. So this one's for councils to decide.
Discussion. Councilor Westphal.
I move the arena debenture be renewed for a 5-year term at 2.56%.
Second, Mayor Napier. Discussion. Deputy Mayor Smith.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points. One, just want to take the opportunity to point out to the public, if you're watching on Zoom, the good financial management of this project over 10 years and the fact that we're lucky enough to have lower interest rates. I'm curious if the administration assumed that the updated rates aren't in the proposed 2021 to 2024 budget. I realize I'm not going to try and do the math on what 1.2% less on interest rate is on $2 million over 5 years, but it's got to be tens of thousands of dollars in savings. I would hope that our budgeting process, we're currently set to spend $513,000 in 2021, the same amount we spent in 2020. The more we spend up front, the more we'll save in interest at the end, because we'll pay more principal. So I hope that even if we get a lower rate, we still maintain that level of payment. And lastly, I just wanted to point out to council that it's probably, I mean, I've never seen lending rates this cheap. If we want to build things, this is the time to do it because it is really cheap to borrow money right now. Like tech and services, new town hall, there's no real reason to wait years because it's never going to get cheaper than 2.5%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westwood.
Yes, just to speak to the motion, I support the idea of a safe and secure interest rate that we can lock in, especially even if pre-pandemic, I'm usually a lock-in term for the borrower, but in these uncertain times, being able to commit to especially such an astronomically low interest rate, that I feel that this is a solid and safe choice with an unpredictable market ahead. To get your Smith's comments, he's correct. The borrowing below prime almost now across the board, and 2% debenture rates. It's an astronomical time that is not ever been seen in any of our lifetimes as far as borrowing costs go. So certainly would be now be the time to consider our projects over the next 12 months, getting them moved and committed as quickly as we can, with borrowing capacity being our largest limitation.
Thank you. Yeah, there's stories coming out of the east. You can get a mortgage for 1%. This is the time to, like you said, Deputy Mayor Smith, build. Anyway, we have a question on the floor. All those in favor? You have a question? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Item B, road closure.
Thank you. The Chief Public Health Officer has approved our fireworks display for December 31st, which is a good thing because we have $10,000 worth of fireworks sitting in the 7-bay garage. But in order to keep everybody as spaced out as possible, because we can, if history is any guide, expect a lot of people there on New Year's Eve, and so we want more street available to keep people spread out, and so you're seeing an expanded request for street closure for the display.
Councilor Cox?
I move that the section of road between Marine Drive of Marine Drive between Mill Street and Walrus Street be closed to all traffic from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Thursday, December 31st for the fireworks event.
Seconded. Councilor Corbett. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Choosing of councilors. Councilor Corbett.
I move that Councilor Campbell be excused from the Community Services Standing Committee meeting on December 8th, 2020.
Second by Councilor Bolio. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next meeting, and I know this is a typo, January 12th, 2020. We don't want to go with 2020 again, do we? We've had enough of this year. January 12th, 2021. Huh? Yeah. Okay, get them moving for adjournment. Mayor Napier, seconded by Councilor Cox. Let's go 8 p.m. right on the nose. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Does everybody want 5 minutes, or is it just keep rolling? Okay. So it says 8:15, but I figure it's 8 o'clock. What is it, 6:05?
I will be adding an item to the agenda. So I will approve you. It will be item 10E. It will be an in-camera session.
There's another 101 and 245.
Oh, okay, I'll have to go looking for it. The camera has their CTV 23-3-G. And that is a setting of property tax sale rates.
Or if Laura even wants to bring it in tonight.
Well, let me,
So, given the subject matter, it might be
It's normally an in-camera consideration, I think.
it is, yes. But just, be prepared to manage your agenda accordingly as far as time goes. It might be there, but
I don't want to.
imagery.
Okay.
I feel like it's ugly. Oh, I can do it, I can do it.
I hope so. Really, we should call it off camera, not in camera, right?
Right?
Yeah.
I was so confused before I was on council about like, as per the CTV Act, about not being on camera, I'm thinking, are they talking the TV station? Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry, Bob, I wrote the, when I was reading, I had to write it down wrong, but figure that.
It's so dark, I can't work this morning.
Oh, it is.
Oh, the one motion. Seems like busy putting the lights in, getting the scaffolding around town, getting all the lights put in, that was nice.
Oh, really? But what?
Yeah, we're taking them.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of taking them to Arlen,
Yeah.
we're taking them to
Katie, did your computer not do the restart system?
Yeah, but it's very quickly.
Going to the airport is,
Okay.
as opposed to just taking them to
2
Arlen.
days ago they started it.
I would say they should have taken them to.
It's still quite a backlog, but it would have put hours. Okay, good enough.
Guys, come on.
I'm not too grandkids about
Everything's shut down.
dance class. Go, yeah.
Okay, everyone's back in the chairs, so like 3 minutes after, we'll call the meeting to order at 8:03. Can I have somebody move the approval of the agenda? Sorry, statements of financial interest are first, my apologies. Any declaration of financial interest? Seeing none. No delegations on the agenda for this evening. Now, can someone move the approval of the agenda? Councilor Carter?
I'll move the agenda be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Couvrette. Administration has requested an addition.
Thank you. I'd like to add item 10E under other business, an in-camera session as per Cities, Towns and Villages Act 23-3G, which is the setting of property tax auction sale rates.
Thank you. Mover and seconder, are you amenable to the amendment? Okay, thank you. Any further additions, changes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the agenda as amended? Ready here? Okay, sorry, I didn't see your hand. All right, moving right along. Included in your package is a copy of the minutes from November 10th, 2020. These have been reviewed and adopted at the council meeting of November 17th. We also have a copy of our visions and values, capital plan. I guess my own question, the 2020 capital plan, we'll be discussing in the new year for the 2021 capital plan. So if there's questions for us, the current capital plan, any updates from administration, we could provide that's not already on the agenda. Seeing or hearing none, brings us to our director's report. Administration, if you wish to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser, King of Snow Removal. Let's start off with snow removal. Snow removal was, I'm sure all residents are aware, is ongoing. Pine Crescent, some of them around Pine Crescent and Tamarack Trailer Court, they are a couple of our narrower streets in town. And so we hit those first as a priority. I know it was brought up at a council meeting or maybe a committee meeting about clearing a path, south pathway of the Tabasco Trail. And we are in the process of doing that. I think it's mostly complete. There are a few tight areas where we're having trouble getting our equipment in there, but yeah, for the most part, that should be walkable. Facilities maintenance department has been busy too, take advantage of the warm weather and realizing how many of our decorative lamp posts were burnt, light bulbs were burnt out. So we've been supporting a local contractor and replacing the burnt out bulbs with LED bulbs, so we should see them last for a very long time. And as they're downtown, you'll notice that the Christmas lights are up again, so they did take spent a good portion, not a good portion, but I got Christmas lights up again for another upcoming season. The water treatment plant has also been busy. Probably interesting to know, the GWT-MAC has asked administration if they can use a small portion of our main lift station to put in an auto sampler to take samples out of the sewage to test for COVID. Apparently that testing will give them a better understanding and maybe a quicker analysis of whether COVID's in town or not. Our operators did install it, but being sewage water, it was plugging up pretty regularly, and the samplers from ENR were having trouble trying to maintain it. So we've taken over, since we have to go in anyways, because going down into the stations require different permits and confined space, which they don't have. So we've just taken it over to continue sampling. I believe that's it. Ms. Morrison, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the director or administration?
Oh, not a question, just a comment. The Tabasco Trail does look nice. Now that it's been plowed, I just hope that people start to use it instead of walking on the road. Also, just a suggestion for future snowfalls and big dumps. If you're going to do the roadways or the ditches like you've done in the past, I think if you were to maybe put it on your list, if you wanted to, would be nice. Nazarene Church to the end of McDougall on the east end of town. The McDougall narrows by 2 feet once you hit that intersection on Polar. And it's pretty scary when you're driving around there and there's somebody coming the other way, and the road is not big enough for 2 vehicles. You see the eyes on the other vehicle there white because they don't know if they can make the curve. It's just a suggestion. But other than that, the rest of the town is looking great. Keep up the good work.
Okay. That was the least direct request I think you've made yet, but you got there. Any further questions of your neighbor?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor McCarthy, for that astute observation. My question, I guess, related to that is, knowing that we have paving coming up next year, is there opportunity to expand that portion of McDougall Road?
We will be, later on in this package, we will be talking about an application for funding for paving to the ICIP program. In there is money for upgrades to McDougal. I just can't comment if that area is, the area detailed for the upgrades, unfortunately. I'd have to review them, get back to you on that.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Thank you. That moves us on to the protective services reports. As we do have a lengthy agenda later on in our discussion this evening, I'd ask if the administrator wants to sort of give us identified issues, noteworthy.
No, actually, I was going to say this is a relatively familiar report, not a lot to talk about. I will note in the bylaw enforcement report, we asked the bylaw to put more emphasis on animal control based on what we're hearing from the public. And you see a report that emphasizes animal control. So it shows us that we get listened to, which makes me happy. Thank you.
Any questions from council? Move right along. Advisory boards, in your packages is the Sustainable Development Advisory Board minutes. I hate to say, unfortunately, I actually missed this meeting, and it looks like it was a very busy, active meeting. Administration wants to speak to them.
So I can speak to it. What we brought to SDAB was discussion on zoning in anticipation of potential private cannabis sales in the community. In the cannabis awareness training I've received from the GNWT, the municipalities have the ability to modify their zoning to better control the sale of cannabis. For example, some communities have created buffer zones around schools where cannabis can't be sold. In discussion with SDAB, we felt, or I felt, and SDAB agreed that instead of vilifying one substance, we focus more just on regulated substances in their entirety, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis, and look to see A, if we need to put zoning controls on them, and if so, B, what those zoning controls would look like. Right now, we have no zoning controls, and so it's just fortuitous that we have a liquor store in a relatively good place in our community. But we do, for example, have tobacco sales in residential areas adjacent to schools, these sorts of things. So SDAB is willing to take on the task, and they've requested some information. They want to review current town zones to see sort of where the overlay or overlap between, say, schools and institutional zones may intersect with town center or commercial districts, where we might see unregulated sale of regulated substances if we choose not to put any controls around them. They've also asked for literature review to see what other jurisdictions similar size to Fort Smith are doing to address the issue. So that's been brought to SDAB. We're in the process of doing the administrative thing and doing the research for them that they've requested. And we anticipate more engagement on the topic in January.
We're excited to see a new chair step forward and accept the role as chairperson. It's fantastic for a relatively new member. And thanks to Tim and Cam, who stayed on as I think as vice chair. And along with Melissa, our new chairperson. Very exciting. Sorry, please.
Just a question, wondering if vaping products were included in the list of regulated items for discussion, or if they're included with tobacco sales?
Go ahead.
We didn't put a definition around what would fall into the category of regulated substance. I presume that would be something we'd expect of the SDAB to better nail down. I know we have received correspondence from concerned members of the public previously that the town needs to be more aggressive around vaping products. And while we're late to the gate, this is our opportunity to address them.
Councilor Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just point of interest I wanted to bring up. It's sort of loosely related to the business arising from the minutes. They talk about the climate change adaptation plan for the town and housing needs assessment. I want to focus on the climate change and an article that was published by CBC, I believe it was yesterday, talking about the climate change hub. There's a tender going out for climate change hub for Atlantic Canada. And they are, in the article, they also made reference to the plans to establish one for the north. And I think it's a chance for our community to step forward and say, we are interested in this. We've been very proactive in our climate change position. And I'm of the opinion that these things normally almost by default will go to either Iqaluit, Yellowknife, or Whitehorse. We have a federal government, a territorial government that talk about diversifying economic opportunities to smaller communities. At any time that something like the climate change hub, for example, comes up, they automatically default them to the large community centers. And I want us to seriously look at positioning ourselves to be under consideration when that tender does get called. I don't know what the timelines are on it. I could try to do some research today on it. I had other things I needed to do, but I will hopefully have some additional information in the next week or two on timelines and things like this. But just this is something I think either the Sustainable Advisory Board or the Economic Development Advisory Board should really take their teeth into positioning ourselves so that when this tender comes out, we are a legitimate contender.
Okay. Also noteworthy, and I'm interested to find out more information about this, was around the Arctic Energy Alliance staffing of a 2-year position for employee to update community energy plans. Now, is that through just Arctic Energy Alliance themselves, based out of Illinois, or is that actually the community?
The agreement is for them to have a position in the community. They would fund the position and we would provide the administrative support, the office space and whatnot for the position. So the application is in and we've heard through the grapevine that we're in the running. But they've just delayed award to I guess 2021 when they feel the consultative portion of the job is more easier to happen without a pandemic, everybody vaccinated. So,
that's very exciting. Thank you. As I said, unfortunately, I missed that meeting. So I guess it's been a while since we had successfully had quorum as well. So it's good to see those. So rich and full agenda. Any further questions on the SDAB minutes? Hearing none, we'll move right along. We have an appointment of a board member, actually a couple of board members. Somebody moved, Councilor Cox.
I move that Adam Bays and Ken Zimmer be reappointed to the Sustainable Development Advisory Board for a 2-year term starting January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2022.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councilor MacArthur. Discussion. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Bylaw policy review and development. We have a couple of bylaws for review. For this one here, I guess as we've all had our meeting practice review, I'm sure if we want to start this with the motion, discussion, and then move along. Councilor Cox.
I move that the advisory board bylaw 1009 be brought to the regular meeting of council on December 15th, 2020 for first and second reading.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Councilor Coubet. Discussion. Councilor Cox.
Thank you. So one of the changes in the bylaw is on page 2. And that is item conduct of meetings 2C. Regular meetings of the board shall be held quarterly or on an as and when basis. So there has been, this was discussed at bylaw review committee. I know that this was also the subject of some discussion today at the CSAB meeting. And while members at the CSAB meeting, they fully intend at this time anyway to continue meeting 10 months of the year, every month, with the exception of July and August. There was a suggestion at CSAB that the minimum number of meetings be incorporated into the bylaw for all advisory boards to avoid having the boards stop meeting altogether. We don't want to see them fold. So I'm not sure. I know the language held quarterly. That's at least 4 times a year. I'm not sure what council's sentiments are, if that's frequently enough as a bare minimum, or if we want to specify every 2 months, say 6 times a year, or if quarterly is adequate as a bare minimum. I'd be interested in hearing what other councillors think.
Thank you. Comments or questions, discussion for Councillor Hawks has brought forward? Councillor Carter.
If they were to be quarterly, lots could be missed by each board to get things done. And then to have it, they finally have a meeting, and then it's going to be another 3 months after that to get things approved or something. You know what I mean? So I think boards, these advisory boards should be once a month. Stick with they've been in the past. Lots going to get missed if you start going every 3 months, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Councillor Cox?
Greg, just to clarify, that it would be up to the boards to determine how frequently they meet, so they can continue meeting monthly if they determine that that's how frequently they want to. But my understanding, based on our discussion at bylaw review committee, is that there have been times when some of the advisory boards have been meeting monthly, and that may be too frequently for some of them. So this changing the bylaw would allow them to meet less frequently and not be in violation of the existing bylaw, which currently dictates they have to meet 10 times a year. So I support the change to meeting as often at the discretion of the chairperson or council. I'm just wondering if quarterly as a bare minimum is enough, or if should we say every 2 months, 6 times a year. Quarterly is adequate, then that's great. If they want to meet every month, they continue meeting every month. It's really up to the board and their chair.
Further comment? Oh, sorry, administration.
I just say, yeah, the intent is not that they shall meet fewer times. It's to say they meet when they need to meet, and not when they think they have to meet. If you get the difference there, right? Right now, they have to meet once a month, whether they need to or not. What we're saying is when you need to meet, get together. That might be twice a month. If they're really got their teeth into something and they want to stay at it, they can meet twice a month. But one of the sandwiches, you know, that's not the problem. But if they have nothing, no reason to meet because there's just not anything happening, then they don't have to. Whereas before they had to, right? And if something's come up, it's not just at the behest of council that council says you shall meet. It's also at the behest of the chair. So if a member goes to the chair and says, hey, you know what? There's this burning issue out there, and I'd like to get it addressed, the chair can call a meeting and not have to wait till the next month for the meeting to happen. They can pull the meetings together, and these more spontaneous meetings that happen when necessary, I think, are better able to accommodate the varied needs, because what we're seeing is we're missing out on the private sector because they just don't have the regulated times that perhaps the government employees do that have the ability to sit and schedule every fourth Thursday from 12 to 1, right? The private sector, you know, Councilor MacArthur, you work there sometimes in the busy burly of, you know, trying to keep it all together. You don't always have the time to go to that meeting, right? So we're trying to create a bit more flexibility so that the advisory boards can make the most of their time. It is the intent. If there are better ways to address it, you know, that's why it's before council. I would just note also the other changes that were made to this document were the removal of any references to ex officio, because we've never really, ultimately, if a person is important enough to have an ex officio role on an advisory board, then we as the town should be engaging with them directly outside of the advisory board. For example, we shouldn't need to have an ITI ex officio position on economic development advisory board because our economic development officer should be meeting with ITI on a regular basis, right? And then finally, we updated all the names to include, you know, Community Services Advisory Board, Economic Development, and the Child Care Advisory Board. So expect that when we bring the updated Community Services policy before council, and this is probably the first, the assistant SAO is hearing this, we may talk about bringing a draft of the child care policy as well before council. Yeah, hang your head. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the work with bylaw review committee and bringing us forward. I think it's good work. It seems to me that around the discussion with the intent of the flexibility for advisory boards, really the only issue is 6 or 7 words here in 2C. That's regular meetings of the board should be held quarterly or on an as and when basis, which is what makes it less clear. You simply remove those 7 words. Regular meetings of the board should be held quarterly or more often or more frequently at the discretion of the chairperson and council. I think that would probably meet the intent of the discussion without, if you follow the letter of this bylaw, they can meet once a year, and that would be satisfactory, which I don't think we want to have happen. I agree with Councilor MacArthur's comments that an advisory board that's only meeting quarterly will probably spend much of their meeting time catching up on what's happened and not really kind of getting around to discussing things. However, I also know that the reality of some advisory boards, as staff included for a period of time, was that there was an intense flurry of activity and difficulty meeting quorum over a period of time, saying that the Cultural Services Advisory Board. So I fully support the intent of that. I fully support the intent of the revision. I think removing those 7 words probably makes it a lot clearer for everybody.
Further thoughts, agreements, thoughts?
I agree with Deputy Mayor Smith that the removal of those words would absolutely, it would be held quarterly or more often at the discretion of the chairperson or council. I think that would address my concern. Thank you.
Is there anyone in council who opposes that amendment or needs clarification into that amendment's intent? No, Mayor Baker.
Thank you. With the move to meet less frequently, has there been discussion about the modifying the length of the meeting?
Sorry, just to be specific, I was just looking for direction on that one particular amendment first.
Okay.
If there is no further, then just so we can provide administration with some form of direction for the next amendment if there's nothing further. No one else had anything? You're comfortable with that amendment? Okay, sorry, I wanted to make sure that we clarified that first. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. I just was thinking it was kind of related to if you're meeting less frequently, do you need more time to meet? Because that's also in the bylaw, so I wasn't sure if that was addressed during those discussions. Is there any information from administration on that?
Please.
The bylaw currently reads 90 minutes with the opportunity to extend for another 30, so that's a 2-hour meeting. I would note that one of the things that drove this change is to support the executive secretary. Realize the bylaw, as it reads, requires one of the community volunteers to take minutes. And in acknowledgement of the valuable work that the advisory boards do, we actually commit the executive secretary to their minute taking, but realize in 1 month, that is 11 hours off work hour meetings that occur for the executive secretary. That is 4 advisory boards. That is 3 subcommittees of council. That's 2 evening committee meetings, a council meeting, and then I'm certain there's something else. Oh, 3 committee standing committees of council and a council meeting. So that's 11, not to mention the fact that EMO meetings are also admitted, jump meetings, auction meetings. And so there's a terrible burden on one person to produce all those minutes every month, right? To the detail that councils come to know and love. And so if we thought if we could create a bit of space with the advisory board meetings, we could create a bit of capacity in a bit of room for the executive secretary to keep up. So if the meetings went longer, that would kind of circumvent the effort too, right? If minutes would be twice as long, there'd be fewer meetings, but the minutes would be twice as long.
Okay. So as I'm understanding, there wasn't a particular discussion around meeting length, as it was. If the idea is to also work around other people's schedules, it is ambitious to try to find that magic bullet time and date and hope that we can make it. If we successfully do that, then I think we should get rewarded. I'm not aware of any group that has found a date time that works for everyone. But still the flexibility does make some sense. So with that, then I'm not hearing much interest in changing the date and time, or the time or length. But we have basically the removal of the as on a basis. Is there anything further that council would like to recommend for administration for the amendments to the bylaw for approval? Going once. Okay, hearing none. If that's clear enough direction for administration for an alteration to the bylaw. Thank you. Trying to lose track of where we're at here. We actually still have to vote on the final version of the bylaw. So thank you. Okay, so with that, to call the question, all those in favor of bylaw as amended. Carrie, thank you very much. That brings us to the road assumption bylaw. Can I have somebody move the bylaw? Councilor Brett.
I move that the road assumption bylaw 1010 be brought to the regular meeting of council on December 15th, 2020 for the first and second reading.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor MacArthur. Discussion. Administration.
Thank you. This bylaw is designed for instances where there are private roads, perhaps in subdivisions that have seen development, and the developer is asking the town to assume the roads, whether that's operation, maintenance, recapitalization. The bylaw sets standards to which those roads will be built. However, the bylaw does not allow any discretion in exceeding or circumventing those standards. So if the road, for whatever reason, is not constructed to the standards, there is no clause in there that allows mayor and council to accept the road anyways. That becomes difficult in grandfathered roads, private roads that have been around before these standards were established in the bylaw. And so all this revision to the bylaw does is add a clause that provides council the discretion to accept a road that doesn't meet the standard. course, if that situation ever arose, there would be dialogue with council about what the deficiencies were and whether those deficiencies were acceptable.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Comments, changes? Hearing none. I believe Mr. Seibert will be celebratory of this amendment, as many times he brought up. All those in favor of the bylaw? Carried, thank you very much. This brings us to administration, 9A.
Thank you. It was asked at the last meeting, and I think last week, that this item be brought forward to ensure there was a response from council to the delegation regarding our traffic control in front of the JVT school. There was a request for stop signs on McDougall, at Field, and that other street, Mills, Connegar. Okay. So, there has been no direction of council. If I were to provide a recommendation, it would be, as we've already discussed with council, to load money into the capital budget to do a traffic study of the community that looks at the traffic control devices, location of stop signs, types of stops, four-way, look at speeds throughout the community, look at how pedestrians move as well as road traffic, and look at how ATV traffic moves through the community to try and somehow come up with a holistic vision of how that all happens in the community. Having said that, my experience with the last council was that council wants stop signs, council gonna get their stop signs, and so it is before council how you wish to proceed with the request.
I believe that Councilor Corbett had asked this item be added to the agenda. I'm not sure if he wanted to introduce some thoughts to this discussion, or really open this up to other council's input. Please.
Okay, just trying to recall my request here was, I guess I was seeking what the process was to move the request forward. And obviously the answer has been provided, included on the agenda. So I guess I'll speak to it just briefly is, I know it would be great to be able to conduct the overall community-wide traffic study and respond appropriately, but looking at location of this and just the condition that here we are talking about our youngest and most vulnerable people within the community crossing the street. And I think the original request was reasonably well thought out, and I'd like to see us either move forward with something in the interim to help control traffic along that stretch of McDougall. We're sitting here also grappling with the idea that our bylaw person may not be the best person to deal with this on an ongoing basis. We're saying animal control needs to be addressed and a whole bunch of other issues. So I just want to see us make a decision. Are we going to move forward with the request from the Education Council to help protect children crossing the street?
Thank you, Councilor Cox.
Well, I certainly appreciate Councilor Coubert's comments. I do think that administration's recommendation for a community-wide traffic plan is prudent, especially as we look to consider the briefing notes further in our meeting about the road upgrade program. program, because I think any upgrades, especially to our gravel roads in the community, is going to affect how traffic flows in the community, especially if we start putting in stop signs on what are currently main roads. And so I think if we put in 2 stop signs on Google and we end up paving Marine Drive, I think we're going to run into some significant problems on what could become a thoroughfare right beside the Tabasco Trail. So I do think that while it may seem easy and straightforward to add a couple of stop signs to McDougal and slow people down around in front of the school, by adding those stop signs, I think that it would be prudent of the corporation to look at a traffic plan for the community as a whole.
Thank you. Any further discussion or direction? This would be their chance to talk about stop signs, traffic flow. Council President.
I agree with Councillor Cox that maybe we should do a study on the traffic, because I know a few years ago there was on Conabear, going like PWK, there was a lot of congestion in there and people stopping and kids jumping out and that. And they also thought that maybe they could make that a one-way street. So let's look into our options for traffic control.
Administration.
If you go to Hay River, you notice one of the main downtown streets has been made one way, and that's allowed them to increase parking on the street and manage traffic better. It allowed them to widen the sidewalks too, because the drugstore couldn't fit in a barrier-free ramp in the narrow sidewalk that was there. That was one of the things I did just prior to leaving Hay River. And so, yeah, you can get pretty innovative with the traffic study if you take the time to actually sit and figure out how things work, right? And I think it's a long time coming, because we continue to see frictions between ATV use, pedestrians, and vehicles. We're constantly, bumping into the street lighting. These places where it's dark. This will also inform street lighting and crosswalks in these interfaces. And so I think that regardless of what the eventual solution is for in front of JBT, whether it's continued by law enforcement, whether it's RCMP present, maybe it's reinstatement of JBT's program that they had where people were walking kids across or are doing traffic control, that an overall traffic plan is essential. And we're going to have a very consulted community by the time we're done. If we do a consultation on bylaw enforcement, a consultation on traffic, we're coming out of consultation on strategic marketing and economic development and community recreation center and community services master plan. People are going to have a say in just about every aspect of how the community operates.
I think that's also supposed to be, isn't it? At least that's certainly what we're complaining about, whenever the government above us fails to do so. Smith.
Thank you. So in the time that I've spent on council, this issue has come up multiple times, which goes back to the removal of the fellow parking lanes, I guess, in front of JBT, and the development of the pullout, which is supposed to mitigate some of the safety issues. It seems to continue to be an issue, to the extent that the BA a long conversation about it and brought a motion and brought a recommendation for the council. I've never been an advocate of putting lots of stop signs up around the community. I think my voting record shows that. I do think a stop sign, a three-way stop sign at the corner of Conabear and McDougal is a very prudent move. It's nothing more than allowing someone to make a left-hand turn occasionally in the morning or the lunchtime. I guess my fear the prudent approach is to do a traffic analysis, and there's a lot of different options there, whether they involve crosswalks, lighting, one-way streets, traffic calming measures in various ways. My experience on council is that when you pave the roads, everyone drives faster. And I I've certainly personally seen a lot of people speed through that, and I appreciate the work of the bylaw officer being around the school zone on a regular basis. It doesn't work well. The way the traffic flows in the community around the schools doesn't work well, neither at PWK nor at GBT. You have endless vehicles, especially in the wintertime, piled up in parking lots. More planning and foresight was probably required initially. So I'm very supportive of the idea of the town having a comprehensive traffic study. The unfortunate reality of that is that that's going to be a year and a half from now before you get any kind of decisions, especially with what I know is going to be a very busy summer for administration and a number of other projects. So what is council going to do in the interim to address the very real concern that the DEA has that it's not a safe area for children and teachers and parents crossing? I don't feel comfortable as a counselor saying, well, we're going to have a study and, a year and a half from now, there might be some kind of solution. In the meantime, hopefully no one gets hit. I mean, if we keep digging up roads, that's a really good way to keep slowing people down. More water, sewer work. You couldn't even get through that intersection for 6 months at long.
Sure, one's not even done yet.
Yeah. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that while studies a prudent approach, it doesn't remotely address the immediate request that council has been given. And I don't know what the solution to that is, if that's a commitment that the bylaw officer will be present at certain times, that there's a staffing impact on that, or if there's other solutions that can be found that avoid the actual installation of the stop sign. But I think we're just kind of kicking the issue down the road in the hopes that it gets a solution later.
Thank you.
Yes, I think we should come up with a short-term solution for now, but I also would like to see the study done.
That's one second there, Councilor Crosser. Yeah, and that's a good idea as well. So as it has come up a number of times over the years, I think that the idea of the grandiose plan myself opposed once upon a time simply because it was kicking the can down the road for a simple discussion. And then what we ended up with was not adequate enough. But I just thought, as administration, I made a comment about other recommendations of the communities, if they can provide insight as to the length of study that took place before implementing one-way streets to accommodate the sidewalks in neighborhoods.
There was no study. It was in response to an issue to get the sidewalks wide enough to be able to put barrier-free ramps into the stores there. And so, yeah, it was just done. Right. Temporary signage. We can put up a stop sign and remove it. Is that the solution, or is saying no parking on the other side of the street? Is that parking lot the place where people should be dropping off their kids? Right? Do we inconvenience the entire community because of this one situation where perhaps there could be some other thing done to stop the kids having to cross the street in that area? It just seems this is the most blunt force solution. And have we considered other solutions other than just more stop signs? It's similar. I'm reminded of when council was petitioned about the occupants of the shelter who would come strolling downtown every morning when they were kicked out of the shelter. And they would go and they would sit on the benches in front of the seniors building, and council's solution to that was to remove the benches. I don't know, it might have fixed that one particular problem, but not giving them a place to sit down, I don't think solves the larger problem, right? And so I would just suggest that if council sees a problem, perhaps there's a more targeted fix other than kind of the symptomatic solution. If kids are crossing the road and there's an issue there, stopping traffic might not be the first stop in that solution. Now, I don't have kids, so I don't quite know how it all works down there. People who have to travel through the area every day might have a better idea than I, but I think that the problem began when that became a parking lot across the street from JP JGBT, and when Greenhouse and Roundhouse were there, it was not a problem because people were dropping their kids off on the other side of the road, right? So, these are the sorts of things I ask because someone goes and decides that's going to be a parking lot. Now the town has to get sort of on a reactive measure to go and fix all the problems caused by that decision. And, that might be the final solution, but do we do a bit of diligence to find out if that is the only solution or not? This is the sort of things we think about, administratively, if we were looking to solve the problem.
That's a request to have a comment first.
Well, I definitely agree with doing the town road plan, but in the meantime, should be something done. And you can't make Connie Bear into one-way street. You can't, it's impossible, because you're gonna have a congestion at either end. We've got a four-way at the other end, traffic's moving slow enough. If you have the one-way going south to north, well, there's no stop sign, so people are gonna be sitting at that stop sign trying to turn left or right in McDougal for, well, lunch is over, time to go back to work. They'll sit there. And as far as the parking across from JBT, well, there's nothing that can be done about that. That's government property. That's where the teachers park. Unless you had government say they'd have to go and put fences in and not let anybody in it, but I don't ever see that happening. It's going to be a problem till we figure out what to do with the stop sign. Can we put a stop sign in till the end of June? And then pull it? It's a temporary fix until we come up with this road plan. Just another thought. Thanks.
I believe I had Deputy Mayor Smith have a comment first.
Thank you. Just going back to the greenhouse, brownhouse, I mean, that was the whole issue with the parallel parking that was in front of JBT. That became the issue because you had multiple vehicles all stopping, which is why the solution was enacted to build the pullout, which of course long-term hasn't worked either. Personally, I'm in favor of roundabouts. I love roundabouts. Roundabout corner on the ground might be great, right? Traffic calming, slows everyone down. I totally agree that we need a long-term solution that looks at the community entirety. I just don't feel like that addresses the concern of the delegation. I like Councilor McArthur's idea of having a temporary stop sign in there, or a three-way, I guess, at Conner and Google to at least alleviate the immediate concern.
Thank you, Councilor Westphal. I do agree with continuing moving toward getting a traffic plan. I'm not sure that adding a stop sign at the corner of McDougal and Conner and then McDougal and Field or wherever those stop signs would be is really the best solution when you're looking at the times that school is in session. And probably my recommendation, and I don't know if this is what would come out of a traffic plan, is that a flashing pedestrian sign for that crossing might be more effective at slowing traffic than putting in a stop sign and then 20 meters away having a crosswalk, and then 20 meters away from that having another crosswalk. As well, they're at the corner of Conner and McDougal. You could possibly prevent some backups by having right turns only between 8 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. The same with King Street and McDougal Road, having right turns only between certain periods of time. Rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the evening. With people trying to turn left, you get a lot of backups at those times, and I think that those issues would come out in a traffic study. So I respect the request to put in a stop sign, that there is an issue that has been identified by the public and a request put forward. I do think that we need to move forward with the traffic plan. Is there a possibility of having I think it costs about $20,000 or $50,000 for the flashing pedestrian signs. Could we get a quote on what that would cost and how easy it would be to put something like that in?
Councilor Cravat, you also had a question?
Just potential solution to it. I know it would probably create headaches for the road clearing during winter time, but I've been to many places that have speed bumps, and they are quite effective in slowing traffic down. And it does, it's about, I guess the problem with stop signs is bringing traffic to a screeching halt, where the road speed bump, which is suitably slow the traffic down to a suitable speed for going through the school zone. And the other thing is just put a radar camera up there, and anybody that does over 30 kilometers an hour receives a piece of mail from the town saying fuel money.
So just before we go, Deputy Mayor Smith had something here. This highlights the very challenge here, which is the initial need about a dozen years ago for a traffic analysis, which ended up resulting in being just the three members of the Municipal Services Committee at the time coming up with the orange highlighters on the map, which was not very popular among the council and barely passed. Highlights again a similar situation where administration has recommended to task experts with the design that, though painful, and again, I'm probably putting more of my editorial on this than I should be, but I've just listened to 7 completely different proposals as to everyone's an expert on traffic. But it's human nature, especially because we all drive and all live in the community. But I think this is exactly the issue that the administration has highlighted. We try to avoid.
And I've also heard loud and clear that that there's a need for a more immediate interim solution. So let us take it back, sharpen our our pencils, and bring something back to council about a more immediate solution pending the big deal. It might be flashing lights. Maybe we get some of those battery packs and attach them to the school zone speed lights. Something to change it up to draw more attention. Perhaps it is a stop sign, even if it's only temporary. One thing we have to realize with stop signs is that a lot of people drive through this community in remote control, right? And so it takes them a few passes through an intersection, myself included, before I notice anything's changed. And so to have sort of that much, stop signs there and then it's gone and then it's there again kind of situation is something we may want to consider avoiding. But what we'll do is we will look at immediate solutions to keep the area safe until such time as we can do a broader analysis of the situation. And we will bring those immediate solutions to you, if not to council this December, to the cycle in January.
That sounds satisfactory to council as a action for administration for us? Something, Council McCarthy.
Just a quick comment. Let's just put a toll booth on McDougal. Then they'll just leave it alone.
Idea number 10.
I'll get another one.
Yeah, this is one of those, I was, one of my first learning examples was the petition on Pine Crescent, which was to have sidewalks, speed bumps, stop signs. I think in the end, we got a 30 zone that no one knows about.
So here's idea number 12. It's the one I forgot to mention earlier. I think a temporary flashing three-way stop would be the ideal. I've seen them in a lot of school zones, so it flashes red at certain times of the day, and the rest of the time it's a yellow, and it's not a three-way.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. That was good. Some more
has nothing to do with the town.
Okay, well, then
This is directed at the DEA this time.
okay,
Grades 1 to 3 get 11:45, have to be in school at 12:45. Grades 4 to 6 get out at 12, go back to school at 1.
that's it, we're done.
15-minute gap.
Okay, no, moving on.
That's what they do now.
Huh?
That's what they do now.
We have a very long agenda. We're gonna keep going. So, we have briefing notes here for under other business, 10A, fitness, equipment purchase. Have, somebody move the recommendation as presented. Councilor Cox.
I move that $62,742.44 spending for Pete's Gym and the fitness room be approved in order to purchase and replace equipment needed for the newly renovated facility, and that the purchase be made from GL 8-2-0551-582 Tag Report RCC.
Thank you. Seconded. Councilor Couvret. Discussion. Administration.
Thank you. So all that number, that's basically the capital account for the CRC renovations. And so this is just added to the overall capital cost. We'll be seeing a few of these come through because what we call FF&E, fittings, furniture, and equipment, are not part of the contract. So the furniture that goes into the building we're renovating, we have to buy separately. As I stated, this is probably going to be the biggest chunk. This will be an IT purchase as well, but this one is all the equipment required to fill Pete's Gym because it's a bigger space than it was previously. So, we need more stuff. This has all been done through a dialogue with users. So they provided a great deal of input. We want them to be happy. As I've stated numerous times, we want the new facility to be better than the old facility. This is part of doing that. So we went to a vendor. All our current fitness equipment is all Life Fitness. So the person we're working with is the only seller of Life Fitness. He's got the Western Canadian distributor, the Apple Fitness people. And so they provided quotes for all the equipment. They also provided layouts, assistance with the purchase, specifying out all the equipment, which gets us to this. This is above my spending authority, which is why it is before council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for administration? Go ahead.
I just heard you mention that this is also IT purchase. Is that for the equipment, like, so who's gonna maintain the equipment and how often is it gonna be serviced? Or is it something very, very basic equipment that can be without all this computerized stuff that can go wrong?
There is computerized stuff that can go wrong. We do struggle with getting adequate maintenance for more complicated fitness equipment, with the computerized controls, lots of fine moving parts. However, this vendor does service their equipment and do travel to the north to service their equipment. So this is the other reason we've chosen to go directly to this vendor. And perhaps Ms. Wade, do you want to speak more to the maintenance support they provide?
So yeah, they do travel to Fort Simpson, and this is also the type of equipment that is currently in the PWK facility through this vendor, Apple Fitness, so they support that equipment as well. But they also provide training for local staff to become facility or equipment maintainers, certified equipment maintainers, and will provide remote support as well. As part of their pricing.
So, Councilor Cox.
Just to clarify, Councilor Fisher had asked about the IT component, but I believe that's going to be a separate bill that comes to council.
Yeah, sorry for any confusion. There's going to be a lot of electronic fitness equipment, but when I mentioned that IT, we're going to have, I see it as 3 buys. There's going to be the buy of all the fitness equipment, which is before council now. There's going to be a buy of all the furniture, which is all the chairs and tables, daycare stuff. And then the third one is it's going to be an IT buy. We're going to need televisions for the fitness center. We're going to need cameras. We're going to need wireless radios. We're going to need all the things, because it's gonna be a fully wired building, and so we'll have to sort of outfit it accordingly. And most of that scoping will be tied to the next phase of design, when the consultant will be bringing us the mechanical, electrical component of the design of the building.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, just wanted to commend the town community services staff and municipal services staff for initiating a process where they consult directly with user groups. And hopefully this alleviates some of the kind of ongoing concerns you heard about at Beats Gym and frustrations with equipment and whatnot, because now you're, they should be getting, obviously, you can spend a lot of money on this, a lot more than what we're spending. If everyone's wish list is completely fulfilled, but it's a great process to work with users. And I just wanted to, as a shout out to that. Thanks.
Hearing nothing further, all those in favor of the recommendation? Carried, thank you. That brings us on to other business B, ICIP Cultural Spaces Funding Application. Administrative, I guess we'll start with the recommendation as well. Councilor Brett.
I move that the ICIP cultural space funding application be accepted as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Travis. Discussion. Administration.
Thank you. ICIP is the latest round of federal capital funding. We've seen other iterations of it. For example, small community funding is supporting the community and recreation center renovations, and clean water and wastewater funding is supporting the water and sewer works downtown. The ICIP funding has three separate streams. One is cultural spaces, one is landfills, and one is paving. And this evening you're going to see applications for each. Before council currently is the cultural spaces application, where we are applying for money for the Connie Bear Park updating. And so the intent with Connie Bear Park is to remove one of the limitations for the area, which is parking. So the idea there is to acquire adjacent land, demolish the existing infrastructure on that lot and pave it. That's phase one. The other second phase will be consultation with residents and community. We have done some initial consultation at the development of our downtown development plan. And so now more focused, specific consultation with residents on Connie Bear Park specifically, with the end result being we're calling it an intimate venue, so a space, a smaller open air theater venue for smaller acoustic performances, theater, that sort of thing, as well as an open air museum, so a place where there are displays that can be outdoors that celebrate the cultural heritage of Fort Smith. So that's what this funding is for. There are also funding applications out to ITI for their tourism infrastructure development money, which Ms. White referred to at the previous meeting. So hopefully both or one of our sets of applications comes through so we can advance this project.
Thank you. Any questions? Recommendation.
Sorry, I sent a clarification. So there's no dollar figure attached to the motion, and that's because it's an application, and therefore the dollar figure will be attached to the received contribution agreement if and when the funding program is approved. Is that the process? I just typically you need a motion of council for these kinds of things, and then there needs to be some kind of commitment out of the capital plan that the funding is there, and we have an approved capital plan. So just look for clarification.
So there is a section that delineates the cost. If you look at the top of page 2 with the amount applicant's contribution of $121,875, that would be in approval of the application. Council is de facto approving the contribution there. Realize there is downtown development funds included in this year's capital plan, so the money is already committed by council. This is why we could in good conscience submit the application.
As part of the process, do have any idea of cost to, of demolition of the premises?
No, not really. I mean, the number I've been tossing around is about $150,000, but I have no real idea. We use that as a base figure, but there would have to be some sort of a cost estimating. But that would be, we would go down that route until we had confirmed funds.
Anything further? Bring down all those in favor of the recommendation. Carried. Thank you. Brings us to item C, landfill expansion funding application. Similarly, another ICIP application. Can I have somebody move the recommendation? Councilor McArthur.
I move that the ICIP landfill expansion funding application be accepted as presented.
Thank you. Do we have someone to second? Councilor Bowling, thank you very much. The administration, wish to speak to this as well.
Thank you. The landfill expansion is a required exercise. That's for our water license. Our landfill is nearing capacity. And prudent management requires that we cap the existing site, which is to put an engineered layer over top of all the existing garbage to limit surface water from leaching through the garbage. And further, we create new cells that are aligned to stop any leachate into the new garbage cells from getting into the water table. Included in the design is a compost area as well as transfer station so that residents don't have to go deep into the landfill and can better segregate their waste. Again, this project had been on the capital plan at $1.5 million. Estimates came through my trier at $3 million. So the project was shelved pending additional funds. We knew that the ICIP program was coming and we knew that it was going to have a landfill stream. And so the project exists in the 20-year capital plan and it's before council now, the ICIP application to access the funds where the town's balance would come from reserves, utility reserves.
Thank you very much. Discussion? Questions? Comments? I'd just like to comment that I would love to see the enhanced separation bins is something that's discussed in the waste management plan for a number of years. So, and then let's hope for the best for our application. All those in favor of the recommendation? Carried. Thank you very much. Item B, ICIP road upgrade program funding application. Councilor Cox.
I move that the ICIP road upgrade program funding application be accepted as presented.
Thank you. And then I saw Councilor Brett had his hand up earlier. Second. Administration.
Thank you. The final funding stream from ICIP is paving, and this is a paving application for council. One thing I failed to mention in the discussion about landfilling is that one of the requirements of ICP is the concept of shovel-ready projects. We have to be ready to build them. So in the case of the landfill, we have the design complete. It was only after the design was completed and we got the final cost estimates in that we realized that we didn't quite have the money in the bank. In the case of paving is relatively more simple. You don't need a design so much. We have quantities. We know recent pricing for the paving work we've done. So what the expected cost could be. All our drainage is already in place and our road beds are prepped. So it is really just a matter of putting the asphalt down. The application is in 3 sections. The first section is going to be new asphalt. So that is all existing roads in the communities that are not paved now. That's your Bell Rock, your Marine Drive, your Park Drive, and your Primrose and Carl's Drive would all be paved. As I said, the road beds have been developed. The drainage is in place there already. Asphalt repairs is what I referred to earlier, where some of that repair is located on McDougall and a couple others. These are what we call second layers, where you would just put a new layer over the existing layer to just basically build everything up and strengthen it. And then finally, storm sewer for the downtown core. I'm sure all of you at one time in the past month or so have been approached by engaged residents about putting in what's called storm sewer and curb and gutter. So what the storm sewer is it's like an underground ditch. And then curb and gutter is where your road, if you know in a city, your road goes right up to the sidewalk, forming a curb, and built into that curb is a gutter, which then drains down into your storm sewer. So the pricing for this is approximately $750,000 for the storm sewer, $750,000 for the curb and gutter. It would run from along Bugle from Portage to Brainerd, and then turn down Brainerd and run towards the liquor store, approximately 450 meters, all told. And so this is shovel ready, as I said. We have the quantities for all the work required. When we first initiated the sewer rebuild, we did ask the engineers to look at storm sewer for the project. They did initial designs, so the initial design is already complete. It's just when the cost came in at $1.5 million, we deemed it unaffordable. And so took it out of the scope. Now that this new money is available, we're reapplying it. We have a contractor in place already, both for the paving and for the water and sewer work and the drainage work in the area. So it is as shovel ready as we're going to get. Hence the application for ICIP and for council. The cost to the town for this additional work would be taken from CPI funds.
Thank you. Questions for administration? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? Carried, thank you very much. That brings us to item E, which was added to the agenda as an in-camera session. So actually we need a recommendation from council for us to move in camera for section 23.3/3G for property tax rates. Can I have somebody make that recommendation? Councilor Prevet.
Thank you. I move that council mayor go in camera per section 23 of the City, Villages and Towns Act.
Thank you. Seconded. Mayor Napier. Discussion on the motion. Just for clarification, that we had as 23-3G for property tax sale rate review. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll take a couple minutes here to give everyone a chance to adapt.